Always make sure you follow the instructions, do the right case. Other thing I'd say about the assignments I got turned in is the whole point is this is to be a case brief. So it's to make it easy to break down what are the main components of the case and the decision. So if your case brief is really long, if your recitement of facts is really long, you want to break it down to like the key facts that the court, that the parties argued and that the court relied on. And if you have a very long statement of facts, you're not really boiling it down to the essential issues. As I said before, as a lawyer, you want to be trained to answer the judge's question in a way that is responsive and complete, gives the judge everything he or she needs to decide the case, but as quickly as possible. A judge, I want to sit there all day and listen to your answer. The more you can go, here you go, judge, 1, 2, 3. And the judge goes, oh yeah, 1, 2, 3, I can decide this case. So, and I clerked for a judge. So I sat and actually wrote the judge's opinions. And so I know, like, if you get a chance to do that, that's good experience working in a judge's office, and you find out, you learn from your personal experience, like, what does a judge need to decide that you have two parties argue one thing? I'm right because of this, and I'm right because of that. And you really help your chance of winning if you can, really direct the judge to what he or she needs to write in the opinion. Bam, 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 this side won because of this. So make the case briefs brief. Brief means short. It's really, especially in court, important to follow the instructions. When I was a law student, I worked in a lawyer's office, as an intern helping out in the law firm. And I was a good law student. They gave me more responsibility than they should have. They had a case going up on an appeal, and they asked me to research it and write the brief that went into the court to read, which I did. And I analyzed the facts, and I analyzed the law, and I wrote the brief, on why one side should win, and handed it to the lawyer I was working for while I was a law student. And I didn't think anything else about it. But every court has its own rules and its own instructions. And, I had just written out my answer like I was a law student. You write my answer, and actually it was turned it into the lawyer. It was single spaced. And I didn't know, but every court has its own rules, including how to submit your briefs. And this court had its own rules about how to submit the brief. So the brief has to be double spaced. And I had handed something into the lawyer. I figured, well, if they need whatever they need to do with this, they'll do it. If I had been a really good intern, I would have looked up all the court rules and seen, the answer has to be double spaced. I honestly also never thought that the lawyer would turn in what I wrote without looking at it, changing it, doing anything to it. Like, it's so perfect. I'm just going to hand it into the court. It's such a brilliant law student. And when we went to court, the judge came out and said, I have, and it's a very embarrassing moment for the lawyer, a little bit for me, but more so for the lawyer. I was a law student. I'm not supposed to know how the court works. And the judge came out and said, I've received your brief, but I did not read it because it's single spaced, and our court rules say the briefs have to be double spaced. You didn't even follow the court rules. I'm not going to read your brief. So that does not help you win your case at all. So the point is, follow the instructions of the assignment and give the judge what he needs or she needs. And then we have these couple of cases that we're going to talk about today that maybe should be more interesting cases for y'all. We have Elvin and Elvis. How many of y'all know who Elvin is? You ever heard of Elvin? Nobody? What about Elvis? Y'all know who Elvis is? No, nobody knows who Elvis is? Oh gosh, well, we'll have to have a little education on who these people are. So the first case, and these cases are supposed to be about promissory estoppel, which they are. And after reading these cases, you should start getting a firm grip on what promissory estoppel is. It's not a contract. But it's a theory of recovering. It's a theory in which somebody's promise can be enforced even though there was not a contract. Because remember, doing a formal contract is one thing. We've looked at all these cases. Nobody had a formal contract. The people who opened the box and got out the papers and looked at them, they didn't have a formal contract. The auntie, I say she did have a formal contract with her nephew when she wrote the note. But the judge said she did not have a formal contract when she said, I want to give you $3,000 for love and affection. That's not a contract, according to the judge. But the real issue is always when you go to court is, do you have to pay? Or if you're in business, like, am I going to get paid? Or can I enforce this promise, whether it's a contract or not? And what we have today is more entertaining. Why? Because they're entertainment law contracts. So y'all don't know who Elvis is. We'll talk about who Elvis is a little bit later, but let's start with the first case. Elvin, you should know who that is. That's the name of the company of this guy who was trying to produce a play, kind of performance, musical performance with, you know what? I wonder. Okay, I think I can, even though I'm not the host, I think I can share my screen. So here. So this first case, we're going to talk about Elvin and Associates versus Franklin. Y'all don't know who Aretha Franklin is? Here, I'll give you a reminder. I bet y'all do. I'm going to give y'all a little reminder, see if y'all recognize this. Let me see. I'm sharing my screen. I got too much junk on my screen. Here we go.
Franklin is the defendant.
Can y'all all see that? Is that screen sharing? Y'all don't see it? I see your head shaking. You don't see it?
Yes.
You do see it? Yes, you don't see it, or yes, you do see it?
We don't see.
You don't see. Okay, I'm glad I asked. Here, let me go. Let's see if I can. Why I can't. Okay, here we go. Let's try this again. I bet y'all can hear that. Oh, host has disabled the screen sharing. Is there a host out there who can enable the professor to share the screen? Oh, okay. Apparently not. Okay, well, that's a problem. I thought I could share. Can y'all hear that? Did y'all hear that music?
No.
You couldn't hear it. Let me try again. Yeah. Y'all couldn't hear Aretha Franklin singing?
No.
No. Okay, well, I'm sorry. I did not know that they had disabled me from sharing a screen. Anyway, Aretha Franklin's famous singer in America. You might have heard, if you could have heard this song, you probably go like, oh, I've heard that song before. R-E-S-P-E-C-T, respect. You give me a little respect. Anyway, very famous singer in America. If you did not know, you'd have been very entertained by the performance. I was trying to play y'all one of her songs, but this setup won't let me. I'll have to take that up with the state tax university, make a note to let the professor share the screen. Okay. All right. But since we can't share the screen and let y'all hear Aretha Franklin sing, but maybe y'all should Google it sometime, look up Aretha, A-R-E-T-H-A, Franklin, and you'll see that she's, anyway, very famous singer in the United States. In this case, Elvin versus Franklin. This guy, his business is called Elvin Associates, but what's his name? Springer. He's trying to make a contract with this very famous singer to do a series of performances in which Aretha Franklin, who is a famous singer, which is important to understand for the case. She's everybody in America would know. If you say, who's Aretha Franklin, everybody knows who Aretha Franklin is. And she was supposed to perform as Mahalia Jackson, who's not as famous, but she was like back in the 1960s, and she was pretty famous back then, pretty well known. She was a great singer. You look up Mahalia Jackson, listen to some of her music. It's much more entertaining than contract law, I promise you. And well, let's work through the case brief. In this case, Elvin Associates versus Franklin. So who can tell me what's the issue in this case?
Should Aretha Franklin compensate for losses and pay debts?
Compensate whose losses and whose debts?
Elvin Associates.
Yeah. So really, Elvin Associates, that's really this guy. His name is Springer. He's a producer. And producers have to deal with a lot of contracts, because a producer, somebody people produce plays, musical performances, movies. The producer's the one who puts it all together. Going to make a movie. It's got to find somebody to write the movie, or find an author, buy their script, find the actors, find the director, put all these pieces together and get it all working together to make the movie. And so Springer is the producer. as we find out, he's also the author of the script for this performance. He's obviously written some story about Mahalia Jackson, and he wants to produce his own script into this performance. And he thinks, I have this great idea. I'm going to do this kind of musical performance story about a famous singer in the 1960s. And I'm going to get somebody who's a really famous singer to play her part. So I was like, wow. And why would he do that? So everybody will watch this. This was not a movie. This was supposed to be apparently like a stage performance, like a play that was going to go from city to city, like a Broadway play. But he's going to have this famous star that's going to attract everybody to come see it. I don't know, like who's the most famous musician in Ukraine right now? Famous pop singer, rock singer. I don't know many. The only rock singer I know personally is Sergei Fomenko, who quit.
Вакарчук?
Who?
Вячеслав Вакарчук.
Oh, okay. Well, you'll have to email me a link to that music so I can listen to it. I don't know that I've heard that. But a lot of things are famous in America that surely y'all have heard of. Like, let me give you a title. So y'all have heard of Bruce Springsteen? Yes, no, maybe so. Don't know. What about U2? You see this poster behind me of REM? Y'all ever heard of REM? Very famous. This is a poster for them playing in Budapest, not that far from y'all. And I think they've played in Kyiv before, but anyway, it's hard to compare famous people. Y'all heard of Michael Jackson?
Yes.
Yeah, everybody, Michael
Yes.
Jackson. But what about Elvis? I can't believe y'all haven't heard of Elvis. Y'all heard of the Beatles?
Yes.
Elvis
Rolling
Presley.
Stones?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, now we're getting somewhere. So anyway, well, this is the realm we're in today. Contracts for famous performers. They're going to perform. And, you know, y'all just like to go to the concerts or watch the movies, but you had no idea before you read Elvin and Associates versus Franklin how many contracts go in to making something like that happen. It's a good, if you want to be a lawyer and interested in contracts and business, that might be an interesting thing to do. So anyway, but let's get back to what's the issue in this case. You know, it's does Aretha Franklin have to pay? Well, why should she pay? And who should she pay? You know, the end of the case, there's a long list of people who are owed money. And really, in the end, Aretha Franklin is going to pay all those people. Why? Because all of those people had contracts with the producer. The producer went out, he's going to create this show. So he's got a contract with Aretha Franklin, or trying to have a contract with Aretha Franklin. Contract with people to make costumes. He has a contract with people to do lighting and stage, and has a contract with somebody to write music, you know, to create this. So the contract's all over the place. And the producer, he's got a contract with everybody. And he's saying Aretha Franklin made the whole show fall through, and everybody he owes money to, Aretha Franklin should have to pay them and him. So, but what did Aretha Franklin do to cause him to sue her? Why did he sue her? That's sometimes a better question to think of, instead of saying, what's the issue in the case? It's kind of a legal way of thinking about it. A more practical way is like, why did this guy sue her? Why did he take her to court? What did he say she did?
Aretha accept the offer of Ashton Springer's offer to play in his musical, but then she just rejected. And
Yeah. So it's interesting the way you put that, because you said she accepted his offer. What happens if somebody makes an offer and you accept? What does that create? We've talked about it. If I make an offer and you accept and there's consideration, what do we have? What's the name of this course? You have a contract. Offer, acceptance, consideration, that's a contract. So Springer sues her for breach of contract. Does he win?
Yes.
Well, he does win, but does he win on the claim of breach of contract? He says, Aretha Franklin, you famous singer. Well, I'm sorry?
No.
No. Why does the court say no contract? Well, I tell you what, let's do. Let's try to walk through this case. See y'all. Yeah, it's kind of hard for y'all to read these cases and understand what in the world is going on.
In progress.
So we are going to walk through it from front to back. So anyway, I'll help you out a little bit with the issue. So let me ask you this. Did Aretha Franklin make a promise?
Yes.
Yes. What was her promise?
Exactly.
To play in musical.
Yeah, she promised. Well, okay, so she made a promise, and the question is, like all our cases, she made a promise. Is her promise enforceable? This is a little bit different from other cases because, we have a case where their father dies, they open a box, they get out some papers, Sophie makes a promise to her other brother and sister. And the question, is that promise enforceable? Was that a written contract? No. But the question still is her promise enforceable? This is different because here we're getting down to this is serious business. This is show business, and they have contracts. They have written contracts. If I look at all the written contracts they talked about in this case, written contracts, flying it, drafts of written contracts, send them back and forth. And let me ask you this. So in determining whether there was a contract, that's one of the issues, right? Was there a contract? Springer sues Aretha Franklin, said, you breached the contract. And the question is, she made a promise. Yeah, but was it a contract? Was there a contract? And then actually the court says no, but says her promise is enforceable anyway under promissory estoppel. that if there was no contract, but she still has to keep her promise because the Springer relied on her promise. Remember, that's promissory estoppel. You promise, I can promise you anything. I can say, Anastasia, I'm going to give you $1 million, and I don't give it to you. Can Anastasia take me to court? Court, order him to pay the $1 million he promised me.
No, because it was only a promise.
It was only a promise without what?
Consideration.
Without consideration. So it was a gratuitous promise. And those, both of these cases we're looking at today with Aretha Franklin and Elvis Presley, these are gratuitous promises. There's no claim, but well, actually, I'm wrong. Elvis is a gratuitous promise. Pay no attention to what I said. Elvis was a gratuitous promise. He just said, and Elvis, I can't believe y'all, I've never heard of Elvis. I have to send y'all some links to Elvis Presley. Incredibly famous musician, very influential in taking the Black music in America, the rhythm and blues music of Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley. And he was incredibly famous for taking this music from Alabama and Mississippi that was called the blues that the Black people played. It was their kind of traditional and folk music. And he took it and converted it into rock and roll. Y'all have heard of rock and roll, right? You've heard of rock music. And he took it. And actually, Elvis Presley, I wish I could play. I had these videos I was going to play for y'all, but this is set up where it won't let me. I'm going to have to talk to the administrator to say that, you know, to let me share a screen. But I was going to play y'all some of his music. And I bet if you saw it, you go like, oh yeah, I've heard that song. And same with Aretha Franklin. But anyway, Elvis Presley took this Black music. This was starting in the 1950s and adapted it to make it similar to what we think of as rock and roll. Like people like the Rolling Stones and the Beatles were incredibly influenced by Elvis Presley. This is not contract law, but it's maybe more interesting. And he did this wild dancing that was considered obscene. We played in the South in the United States, very conservative people. They kept trying to arrest him because his dancing on stage they thought was too suggestive and obscene, and they tried. And anyway, I'll try to get it set up where I can play some of it for y'all next time. It helps to understand the cases, and especially now that we're on to entertainment law. So anyway, back to this case about Aretha Franklin. So y'all have your cases in front of you. Like if you're in law school in America and we assign some cases, like you come to class with those cases in front of you because the professor's going to ask you a question. And if you don't know the answer, you're going to like look through the case, find the answer. What's the procedural posture of this case? You understand? It's in the first sentence of the opinion, like where we are in the process. Well, it's in the first line. It says, after a bench trial of several days. So a trial, that means it's in the trial court where they've had a trial, and that these two sides, they both came in and presented evidence. You know, Springer came in and showed all his contracts where he owed people money, talked about all his discussions with Aretha Franklin. She came in and said, who knows, you know, and that gets to the position of the parties. You remember, what was Aretha Franklin's position? They're supposed to do this show. She doesn't show up. And what's her what's her reason for saying she shouldn't have to pay Springer?
She said that the plaintiff failed to meet his burden of proof with respect to several of the unpaid debts.
Well, that is true, but see, that's after she's lost the case. So I'm glad you said that. There are two stages to this, and this is very typical of a contract dispute. The first stage is the promise enforceable? Whether it was a contract or not a contract, was there promissory estoppel? The first stage is Aretha Franklin liable? Did she make a promise that Springer can enforce? So that's the first stage of this. And there actually, apparently, if you read in here, there were two separate trials. So the first trial is she liable? Does she owe him? Did she break a promise that she was obligated to keep? Or another way of phrasing that is, did she make a promise that Springer can enforce? And so when you think about that, what are two ways that Springer could enforce her promise? Aretha Franklin promised to sing in this performance. And then she didn't. And do you remember what her reason was? Why didn't she show up? She never showed up for the rehearsals. Why not?
Because she had fear of flying.
Yeah, she said, I'm afraid to fly. She lives in Detroit. The rehearsals are in New York. So I was afraid to get on the plane. Is that a good excuse to breach your contract?
No.
Not really. Although there's an issue there. Did Springer know about her fear of flying?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I were her lawyer, I'd say he knew all along she was afraid to get on the plane. Of course, the counter to that is, well, if she's afraid to get on a plane, then get on a train. I mean, so anyway, she didn't have it, but her position was that her fear of flying made her promise conditional, as if to say, yeah, I promised to be in your performance if I could get on that plane, and you knew I might not get on that plane. But the court doesn't buy that. And that's not a good, and think about it in terms of remember the condo case where the developer says, I want to make this deal, but I have some conditions. I want to make some conditions that I can, that I approve of the leases that Caldwell Banker gets, that they get me a nice French restaurant in my development and a yoga studio and a wine shop. And I want a hair salon in there. So remember that case, he had some conditions. Did the court say, because of those conditions, there's no contract?
No.
No, they said those conditions were really not. Well, they kind of fudged around it because they said he could have gotten out for any reason, but he really had a duty. He assumed a duty to act in good faith about whether he really approved those leases or not. So here again, you see, she's trying to say, well, there was a condition. There was no contract until this condition was met. And she has a pretty far-fetched condition. It's like, there was no contract until I overcame my fear and got on a plane and arrived in New York on the day of rehearsals. That's when there would be a contract in Aretha Franklin's position. But the judge doesn't buy that condition. So that's not a condition that keeps a contract from being formed. And I hate to keep confusing my law students, but really it's fair because an American, this, I hate to say, this is the way American law students are taught. Our professors tried to confuse us. And I don't know why they select these cases to put in the text, because you might have noticed there's a pattern. Is every time I go through and I tell y'all, well, this is how they decided the case, but I think it's wrong. I think the judge was wrong. And seems like a weird way to educate people. We're going to teach you a case and then tell you the case was wrong. But it probably is fair preparation of what you're going to deal with when you step into a courtroom, because sometimes the judges follow the law, sometimes they don't follow the law, sometimes they know what the law is, sometimes they don't know what the law is, sometimes they don't care what the law is, sometimes they care who their friend is. I mean, there's a lot of practicing law really can be this vague, and you go like, oh, especially as law students. When I was a law student, I learned all these rules. I said, learn the rules and learn the law. We're going to go into court, enforce these rules, enforce the law. But sometimes it's a little more complicated than that. I'll tell you why I think this case is wrongly decided, because the court says there was no contract, never was a contract. Why does the court say that? Why does the court say there was no contract? No formal official contract. Did they not write anything down?
They did.
They wrote they were writing contracts back and forth like crazy. This was not the case where they opened the box and then opened their mouth without talking to their lawyer. This was very carefully. They probably spent a fortune on lawyers drafting contracts back and forth in this case. And I say this, and this was not I say this is not a gratuitous promise. There was an offer, right? Springer offered, they negotiated, talked about how much money, so on and so forth. And Aretha Franklin agreed, right? That offer, acceptance. Was there consideration for the agreement?
No,
Why not?
because he gets nothing.
Well, no, yeah. Well, as it happened, he got nothing. But I'm glad you said that. That's wrong, but it actually helps bring up a point. And that's okay. I mean, you're trying, and someday you learn by trying to get the answer, and we're working our way towards there. And I asked you, go back to my question, what are the two ways he could have held her to her promise? She promised to perform. Then she said, no, I'm not, I'm not getting on that plane. I'm not going to New York. So she did not keep her promise. There's a separate question, whether that promise was a contract. We'll get to that in a minute, but what are the two ways Springer could have enforced her promise? What happens in this case? What's the end result? They talk about at the end, all of those music composers and set designers and costume designers. What does Aretha Franklin have to do?
To pay a
She
debt.
has to pay them. So this was enforced against her by saying, you have to pay. You have to pay for your promise that you didn't keep. What's the other way Springer could have enforced the promise? And he actually kind of tried to do it before he sued her.
To change a transport.
To do what?
To change a transport.
Well, yeah. Well, she could have performed if she got on the train, right? And that's another thing. Well, you're right, Tatiana. Springer could have gone to the court and said, court, we have an agreement for her to be, we have an enforceable promise for her to perform. Order her to get on the damn train and come to New York and be in the performance, right? Two ways to
Yes.
enforce the promise. One is they don't do that, right? Why do you suppose they don't do that? They say, the court say, Aretha Franklin, you promised, get on the damn train and go to New York. Keep your promise.
Because she said that she will overcome her fear.
Because, I'm sorry? Because she what?
Because she said that she will overcome her fear.
Oh, yeah. Well, she did say that, but what issue does that go to? Because that came up, right? Springer found out what? That she had canceled some other performances because she was afraid to get on the plane. So he knew that. So he went to her. So based on that, if you're Aretha Franklin's lawyer, what do you argue? Because remember, we're talking about reliance. I'm going to help you out. The court said there was not a contract because there was a little clause on all their drafts that said, this is our understanding until we execute a more formal agreement. And did Aretha Franklin ever sign the final agreement?
No, she didn't.
No. Did they agree on everything? Did all the lawyers talk everything through and say, yeah, we agree on all these terms?
Yes.
Yes, they did. And when was Aretha Franklin supposed to sign the contract?
After
It's in the opinion. So as lawyers, you need to start raking your brain. You're going like, if I miss that, then you're going like, I might have a hard time in court as a lawyer if I'm not getting these essential facts out of reading the case. When was she supposed to sign? They agreed on everything and she was going to sign when? When did they plan for her to sign the final agreement?
when the shadow will be accepted.
Well, there was a provision in there that said that's the reason the court said it's not a contract. The paperwork said when this is signed, this will be accepted and this will be a final contract. And it was never signed. Why not? Why was it never signed? Was it because they didn't agree on a term? It's a very
Because they should sign it in New York.
exactly. She was supposed to sign the contract the day she showed up to keep her promise and start rehearsals. This is actually a very good practical lesson for you as lawyers. Get the person to sign the agreement before the day they're supposed to start performing the agreement. The whole worry was she wouldn't fly to New York, but then they come up with this plan that she'll sign the agreement the day she arrives in New York to start rehearsal. That's when she's going to sign everything. Do you want to have your agreement in place before the day you start rehearsals? You're the lawyer. You have your choice. We can have the contract all signed and everything agreed and executed. Aretha Franklin is signed a month before we're supposed to start rehearsal. Or let's have her sign the day we're supposed to start rehearsing. Which one do you pick as a lawyer? What's your best choice? Multiple choice question. Would you rather have Aretha Franklin sign a month before she's supposed to start work or the day she's going to start work?
First version is better.
Yeah, a month. If you're a lawyer,